الحمد لله الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على سيد الرسل والأنبياء ماحي الذنوب والخطا منبع الجود والكرم والعطاء الذي دنا فتدلى فكان قاب قوسين أو أدنى وعلى آله وصحبه أولي الصدق والصفاء أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا آمنت بالله صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الكريم الأمين ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رحمة للعالمين وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا شفيع المذنبين. My respectable brothers in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is due to the infinite mercy of Allah Almighty that He has given us this opportunity to gather for His sake. And I pray that Allah Almighty accepts this gathering from us and makes it a source of guidance for us in this world and salvation in the hereafter. Ameen. The topic that I have been given is one which has probably put me deeper into thought than any other topic I've ever spoken on, probably. Because the personality of Mawlana, as he's affectionately known throughout the world, or Rumi, more commonly in the Western world, is probably one of the most misunderstood personalities in Islam. And it may be because of the fact that his notoriety is so great and his works have been so vastly translated and interpreted that every translator and every interpreter, when they look at the work of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah through their own eyes and their own lens, then they interpret that in their own way, not truly understanding what Mawlana is saying. There was once a gathering of some people. Amongst them was a king, the king of his time. He was sitting with the people, his cabinet, his ministers. Among them were also some scholars and some Sufiya. And they were talking about some of the sayings of the awliya kiram, and they were discussing and debating about what those sayings might mean. There was one individual in that gathering who sat silently throughout, not saying a word. Eventually the others, they asked him why he was not presenting his opinion on the matter at hand. And he asked them very bluntly, he said, "Do you understand the speech of dogs?" And they said, "No, we don't." He said, "Do you understand the speech of cats?" And they said, "No." He said, "Cats and dogs are amongst the lowest ranking in Allah Almighty's creation, and the awliya are amongst the highest ranking. If you cannot understand the speech of the lowest ranking amongst Allah Almighty's creation, how can you claim to understand the speech of the highest ranking amongst them?" And so I was put into great thought about how I should tackle this issue, because in reality, someone like me, a mere student of the deen, is nowhere near the position to be able to interpret or even understand the works of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah. Inshallah, in the time that I've been given, I will try to shed some light on the biography of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, and perhaps if we have time at the end to recite to you a couple of his verses and a story from his greatest work, which is the Masnavi. The ayah from the Noble Quran, which I had the honor and privilege of reciting before you, is as follows: وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Allah Almighty says that those who struggle for our sake, then we show them our ways. And this series, the Friends of Allah, is about those people who struggled for the cause of Allah Almighty. And Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah is one of the greatest personalities of our history, and we are sitting here hundreds of years later, thousands of miles from where he was, talking about him, remembering him. And this is Allah Almighty's reward upon those people who struggle in his path. To give you some simple facts, first of all, about Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah. His name was Muhammad ibn Muhammad ibn Muhammad. His own name was Muhammad, his father's name was Muhammad, and his grandfather's name was Muhammad as well. He was given the title Jalaluddin, and that's how he is probably more commonly known now. Jalaluddin Rumi, he is known as. And his other names by which he is known amongst the Muslim world is Mawlana, and amongst the non-Muslim world or the Western world is Rumi. He was born in the city of Balkh, which is in present day the area around Afghanistan. And he was born, there's different reports, conflicting reports. Some say 1207, this is the common area we're talking about. And some say 1201, some say 1203. So, towards the end of the 500 years of Hijrah, he was born round about that period of time. I think the most widely accepted version, particularly in the West, is 1207. And as a result of this, the year 2007 was marked by UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. They named the year 2007 the year of Rumi because it was his 800th birthday. And they commissioned lots of works during that year to commemorate the life of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah. And that's just one indication of how widely accepted his works are. He passed away in the year 1273, aged about 66, in the city of Konya in Turkey. His father's name was Muhammad, like I already mentioned, but he was more commonly known as Bahauddin Walad. And he was known amongst the people of the time by the title of Sultanul Ulama. and he was a great scholar of his time. He was the disciple of a great sheikh known as Sheikh Najmuddin Kubra. And this Sheikh Najmuddin Kubra, his actual name was Ahmad bin Umr, and Najmuddin Kubra is the title by which he is famously known. And the reason why he was given this title, Kubra, is because he was a great debater, and his knowledge was vast, and he was gifted in debating and being able to get his point across so well that whenever he debated with someone, he always won in the end. And he was given this title, Tammatul Kubra, like it comes from the Noble Quran, that Tammatul Kubra, that he's like this great blessing that is complete, and whatever evidence he presents, it just completely makes the other person accept his point of view and the truth of what he is saying. And so he became known as this. He was given this title, and then the Tamma was left off and the Kubra stayed, so he was known as Najmuddin al-Kubra. And some actually say that his nickname was Abul Jannab. Jannab. It's a sigha of mubalagha, Jannab, and it's from Jamb or Ijtinab. And Jannab means the one who is very pious. The actual word, which comes from the root Jim Nun Ba, it means to avoid something. And the ulama have said what it means is that if you're walking along and there was a thorn or something sticking out from one side, and you turned yourself in such a way that you avoided coming into contact with the thorn, this is ijtinab. And so Jannab means the one who is extremely, extremely pious, who is extremely careful about keeping himself clean and not coming into contact with anything that would bring into question his piety or his good actions. And so he was given this title, Abul Jannab. We're talking about the Sheikh of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahma's father, Najmuddin Kubra rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. He was given this title, Abul Jannab, and actually some of the scholars have said that he was given this title in a dream or otherwise by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam himself. And when he was given this title, he asked the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, Ya Rasulullah, is it Abul Janab? Is the noon mukhaffaf? Or is it Abul Jannab? Is it mushaddad, the noon? And the Prophet ﷺ said, it's mushaddad. So this sigha of mubalagha, meaning it's got this extra meaning of really very pious. And so this is the Shaykh of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahma's father. And he was martyred when the Mongols raided that area. And he refused to flee from the Mongols, and he stayed, and him and his disciples, they fought the Mongols, but eventually they were overpowered and he was martyred. And some people, they say about the Sufis that they are pacifists and that the Sufis don't believe in jihad. And when we say jihad, obviously there is very many different interpretations of this word that go around nowadays, but the true meaning of jihad, meaning to fight against yourself, the nafs, the greater jihad, and also the lesser jihad, which is to stand up against tyranny and oppression. The Sufiya were at the forefront of that. And Shaykh Najmuddin Kubra is an example of somebody who stood up to the Mongol forces who were invading the area and just massacring and slaughtering every person that came in their way. And they stood up to that, but they were overpowered, and Allah Almighty blessed them with martyrdom. So this is a little bit about Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, his background. He had an older brother who was called Alauddin Muhammad, but he passed away later on, and he didn't gain as much notoriety as Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah. And also another beautiful thing about Mawlana Rum is that his family tree, his lineage, goes back to the first Khalifa Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, who is widely accepted amongst the Ummah as the best of creation after the Prophets. And so Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, his lineage goes back to Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh. So he was brought up in these noble surroundings. His father was a great scholar himself. He was also a magnet for wisdom and for people of the city. They used to love to go and sit in the company of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah's father. Even the Sultan of the time, he used to come and go, and he used to visit Mawlana Rum alayhi rahma's father, people like Imam Fakhruddin Razi alayhi rahmah, they also used to come and go and visit Sheikh Bahauddin rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. From the teachers of Mawlana Rum was his father, of course, and also from his father's disciples, the mature disciples of his father's, particularly Sheikh Burhanuddin. He was one of the leading teachers of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, and he gained a lot from him. It is said about Mawlana Rum that even as a child, he was very spiritual, even as a child. And people would see this, and the ulama and the Sufiya of the time, they wrote that he had spiritual experiences even as a child. The other day, this idea of children being spiritual, it's somewhat alien to us because of the environment that we live in. And actually yesterday I was giving a talk on the importance of educating your children, and particularly the importance of parents taking charge of their own children's education, because Allah Almighty holds the mother and father primarily responsible for the education of their children. And this is something that we have lost because of the system that we live in. And the system just churns out these robots that we see coming out of schools who are not really capable of bringing that kind of stability to society that they should be. And so this idea that children can be spiritual is something that we seem to have lost now. But something that I heard the other day really sort of made my ears prick up, and it made me think very deeply. I overheard a mother and daughter talking amongst themselves, a very small child, perhaps 4 years old. And the mother said to her, she said, "Who do you love best, mummy or daddy?" This was the question that this mother posed to her child. And I was shocked by the answer. And we're not talking history. I'm talking 3 or 4 days ago in Bradford, right? A child born and bred here in this country. She replies to her mother and she says, "I love Allah and the Prophet ﷺ best." A 4-year-old child. So this idea that children can't be spiritual is something that we have made. It's not the reality. Otherwise, Allah Almighty informed us through His Messenger alayhi salatu wassalam. The Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, he said, "Ma min mawludin illa yuladu ala al-fitra." Every child that comes into this world is born upon the nature of Islam. And so it depends what we do with them. So Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, he was a very spiritual child, and people reported having witnessed him having spiritual experiences as a child as well. His family migrated from Balkh for whatever reason, and historians have given varying accounts, different reasons of why he migrated. One of the reasons that were given is that the Sultan of the time, he became very inclined towards the philosophers, and he had issues with the Sufiyai Kiram, and so Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, his family, his father and his disciple, they decided to migrate from there. And they headed towards the Hijaz to perform Umrah, Hajj, to perform their pilgrimage. They headed towards the Hijaz. Along the way, they stopped at Nishapur. That was the first place where they stopped at. There they were met by one of the great Sufiya of the time, which is Khaja Fariduddin Attar rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. They were met by him. And Sheikh Fariduddin Attar rahmatullahi alayhi, he was an itr seller, a perfume seller. Hence his name Attar. And one day he was in his shop, and a faqir, he came and he had a bowl, and he asked him for something in the way of Allah. He said, "Can you give something in the way of Allah?" And he was busy with his work, so he shunned him and told him to go away. And the faqir insisted, and he didn't pay any attention to him. So the faqir said to him, "Aren't you afraid to die? How are you going to give your life to Allah Almighty if you are turning away those who ask in the way of Allah?" And he turned around and he said, "How am I going to die? How am I going to die? How are you going to die?" And so the faqir, he took his bowl, turned it upside down, put it on the ground, and he lay down, resting his head on the bowl, and he died. And so that was the turning point in Sheikh Attar's life. When he saw this, he realized that this business and the worldly transactions, they are here, but the spiritual path is the one that we ought to seek. And so this was a turning point in his life. So they met Sheikh Fariduddin Attar, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. And the reason why Sheikh Fariduddin Attar, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, was attracted to Sheikh Bahauddin, Mawlana Rum's father, is because Sheikh Fariduddin Attar, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, was a student of Sheikh Najmuddin Kubra, who was Mawlana Rum alayhi rahma's father's sheikh. So they had this thing in common. He was his sheikh and he was his teacher. So he thought he'd go and meet him. When he went to meet him and he arrived, his attention was more drawn to Mawlana Rum than it was to his father. And he was analyzing his face. And he was seeing this strange potential in his face. And he turned around to Mawlana Rum's father and he said, don't be complacent about his education. Don't be complacent about his nurturing, and keep a close eye on him. In fact, he gave him one of his own books, which was a collection of his own thoughts and his own ideas, which is called Asrar Nama, which translates to the Book of Mysteries. And he gave that to Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah to study. Now, how old was Mawlana Rum at this time? Some have said he was 6 years old, and there are varying accounts up to 14 years old. But can you imagine? Sheikh Fariduddin Attar, this amazing scholar and saint, he's giving, and remember, books in those days were not like the books that we have now. It's not you run several thousand copies off the press. These were handwritten manuscripts. People spent their lives compiling these books, and he's handing it over to a child, Sheikh Fariduddin Attar rahmatullah alayhi. So he must have seen something in Mawlana Rum which made him do that. And so he advised his father and gave him this book, and they continued with their journey. And the second place they stopped at along the way was in Baghdad. And in Baghdad, people were drawn to this caravan of people. And they were asking them, where have you come from? And where are you going? And Sheikh Bahauddin, rahmatullah alayhi, Mawlana Rum's father, he replied to the people who asked him, he said, we come from God, and to him again we return. When they asked him, where have you come from? Where are you going? He said, we come from God, and to him we will return. And something about this saying made it so amazing that it just spread like wildfire in the city. People were talking that there is this sheikh, and we asked him, this is what he said. Eventually, this qawl, this saying of Sheikh Bahauddin, going along the grapevine, it reached one of the greatest awliya in Baghdad Sharif at that time. And that was Sheikh Shahabuddin Suhrawardi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. The Suhrawardi tariqah is named after him. So this reached him. And when he heard it, he said, no one other than Sheikh Bahauddin could have said this. And so he ran and he went himself to meet Sheikh Bahauddin rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. And it is said when he greeted him, he lowered himself and he kissed the knees of Sheikh Bahauddin rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, Mawlana Rum's father. So you can see the awliya of the time, wherever they go, wherever they stop, they are drawn to this family, this amazing family. And so then they left. They only stayed 3 days in Baghdad, but during their stay there, they received the sad news that the Mongols had attacked Balkh, the city that they had just left, and that the inhabitants there had been martyred by the Mongols. The third stop along their journey was the Hijaz, where they performed the pilgrimage, and then upon their return journey, they stopped at Damascus for some time. Very briefly, they stopped there, and then they headed off towards Turkey, and they stopped in several places in Turkey. Eventually, they arrived at this place called Karaman in Turkey. And Sheikh Bahauddin rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, one of his habits was that wherever he stopped, he wouldn't stay the night anywhere apart from a madrasa. That's where he would stay the night. And so the Khalifa, the governor of Karaman, he was so impressed by Sheikh Bahauddin rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi that he actually had a madrasa built for them to stay in. And then they resided there for about 7 years, which was the longest stop that they had along their journey. And during these 7 years, Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, he married in that place in Karaman. He married his teacher's daughter. And in the same year, also sadly, his mother and his brother passed away. And then a year later, he was blessed with a son who he named Muhammad Bahauddin, and who is more commonly known as Sultan Walad. And then a year after that, he was blessed with another son who he named Alauddin Muhammad after his brother. And after that, his wife, she left this world, and later on when Mawlana went to Konya, he then remarried and was blessed with a son and a daughter from his second wife also. Konya was the capital of the Seljuk dynasty at that time, and the Khalifa, the governor of Konya, he had heard about Mawlana, that he is stopping at this place called Karaman, not far away from there. And so he sent word to Mawlana inviting him to come to Konya. In fact, it was Mawlana's father who he invited, Sheikh Bahauddin Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, and he went to Konya. He spent the last 2 years of his life in Konya, where he lectured and he called the people towards the path of Allah Almighty. And Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah was aged about 24 when his father left this world. And Sheikh Bahauddin Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, he left 2 things in this world. One was a book, a collection of his lectures and his talks, and the second was his son, Mawlana Rum. So he left these 2 things. One, the book, it was called Ma'arif, and the obviously his son Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah. You could say that was the greater of the 2 treasures, because no doubt, because of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, his notoriety, Sheikh Bahauddin is also known throughout the world as a result of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah's notoriety. And after that time, so Mawlana is about 24 years old at this time. From that point onwards, you can broadly divide his life into 2 parts. His life before he met Sheikh Shams of Tabriz, and his life after he met Sheikh Shams of Tabriz, Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh. And so it was in the year 1231 that his father passed away, and in the year 1244 he met Sheikh Shams of Tabriz. So that's about 13 years. And then in the 29 years after that, they are classed as the era after he had met Sheikh Shams of Tabriz Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh. And if you could label these 2 periods of his life in simple words, you would label the first as the years of reason and the second as the years of love. Because what happened is, before he met Sheikh Shams of Tabriz Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, he excelled very much in the outward knowledge, and he gained a lot of knowledge. In fact, Sheikh Burhanuddin Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, who was one of the foremost disciples of his father left him in the charge of Sheikh Burhanuddin Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh. And after his father left this world, in fact, Mawlana and the relationship that he had with Sheikh Burhanuddin Rahmatullahi alayh was like that of a sheikh and a murid. In fact, Mawlana mentions Sheikh Burhanuddin as his sheikh in the Masnavi in various places. And so they had this close relationship, and Sheikh Burhanuddin Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, he cared for him and guided him after his father left this world. In fact, after his father left the world, he sent him off to Halab to go and study there. And he studied under some notable personalities like Sheikh Kamaluddin Halabi, who is the author of Tarikh Halabi. He tutored Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah there. So he gained a very deep insight into the Islamic sciences. When he came back to Konya, he then spent his time issuing fatwa and serving the deen. And so he was concerned with knowledge and reason and understanding. And that's why that period of his life is known as the period of reason. And then when he met Sheikh Shams of Tabriz, everything changed. And it's really interesting the different versions of how they met. But to understand why the ulama and the awliya, they make this distinction between reason and love. Allama Iqbal alayhi rahmah, he wrote a Farsi sher about Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, and he compares him to Ibn Sina. He was a mathematician and a mantaki, a logician, and he was into his philosophy and into his deep reasoning, Ibn Sina. And so Mawlana Allama Iqbal alayhi rahmah, he says, Buwali an andar gubare nakagum. Abu Ali Sina. That's what he's talking about, Abu Ali Sina. So he says, Bu Ali andar ghubar. Ghubar means dust. Naqa, camel. Bu Ali andar ghubare naqa gum. He's lost in the dust that is arising from the feet of the caravan of camels. What Allama Iqbal is alluding to is that if the beloved, and when the Sufiya, when they talk about the beloved, they're talking about Allah Almighty, the Ma'rifah, the recognition and the love of Allah Almighty. But they talk in parables, in stories, and in metaphors to make it easy for us to understand. And probably this is one of the greatest downfalls of those people who misinterpret the Sufiya, and particularly Mawlana Rum. They don't understand what is he talking about. I've read some really horrendous things in a paper article about Mawlana Rum's poetry regarding the awliya, and I'm not even going to say where this person was taking the argument, right? But it was so misguided, it was unbelievable. And it's because people don't understand the allusions and the imagery and the stories that the Sufiya used to explain a point which is very difficult to explain. I mean, how can you explain Allah Almighty and the relationship that He has with the creation? It's a very difficult concept. But the awliya do that through stories and examples. And so Allama Iqbal is saying here that if we are all in search of the beloved, and if the beloved is aboard this camel in this caravan, Abu Ali Sina, because he's a thinker, he tries to work things out using logic. What he will do, he'll try to look for the footprints in the sand. He'll search for the caravan, but he's always lost in the dust that the caravan raises. He never actually gets to the caravan. Whereas Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, while Abu Ali Sina is lost in the dust, Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah has already reached the velvet curtains to draw back and to be in union with the beloved. And so Allama Iqbal, he says, Bu Ali andar ghubare nakagum, daste Rumi pardae mahmal garift. So he says that while Bu Ali Sina is lost in the dust of the caravan, Rumi's hand has already reached for the curtain to unveil the beloved. And so the world of love and spirituality, it allows one to get beyond the obstacles that reason presents. It's like they say about Imam Razi alayhi rahmah, I believe it is said about him that when he was on his deathbed, the shaitan came to him. And he said to him, you believe in Allah as the Lord of the world, can you prove it? So he gave him one piece of evidence and he refuted it. He gave him another and he refuted it. He gave him another, and this went on until he'd given him almost 100 pieces of evidence for the existence of Allah Almighty, and each time the shaitan would refute that evidence with something else. Eventually, his soul was about to leave his body, and he was in this state where he was almost about to go over onto the side of doubt. And it was then that his sheikh, he saw with his spiritual eye that what was going on with his murid. And so he came to him spiritually and he said to him, why don't you tell him that you believe in Allah without any evidence? And when he said that, then the shaitan left. And so sometimes, just the belief and that feeling, it's far more powerful than trying to reason things out. Inshallah. So this is the period of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, his life, the period of reason and the period of love. Now, how did he meet Shams Tabriz rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi? There are we find varying narrations as to how this happened. There is a book called Jawahirul Mudi'a, and in this the version goes as follows, that Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah was sitting amongst his students and he was surrounded by books, and all of a sudden this dervish, this fakir appeared, in rags, and just looking like somebody very insignificant with disheveled hair and not a very brilliant appearance. And he came out of the blue, and he said to Mawlana, he pointed to the books, and he said, "E jist, what is this?" And Mawlana Rum ala Rahma, he said to him that this is something you don't understand. He thought this is like a fakir. What does he know about knowledge and these things? These are high Islamic sciences. He said, this is something you don't understand. And the moment he said that, all of a sudden the books, they all set on fire. And he was shocked, what's happened here? So he says to the fakir, "E jist, what is this?" And the fakir says, "This is what you don't understand." So he said to him, this is something that you don't understand. And he disappeared. And that's it. That was the moment, that was the turning point in Mawlana's life. He realized that not everything is in the books. And that there is this spiritual path, this knowledge that is transferred from heart to heart as well, which you can't capture in the books. And so he set off, he left everything, left his home, left his students. He went out in search of Shams Tabriz, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. The second version of how this happened was that Sheikh Kamaluddin, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, who he had gone to study from in Halab, he sent Sheikh Shams of Tabriz to find Mawlana Rum, and he said to him, "Go to Konya and go and light the fire of divine love in the heart of the one who is sitting in Konya." So he came to Konya and he took up residence in one of the local inns. And Mawlana was passing by one day, and Sheikh Shams of Tabriz, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, he says to him, "Mawlana, what is the point of worship and the spiritual struggle? What's the purpose of it?" So he said, the purpose of it is to act upon the Sharia. That's the purpose of it, to follow the Sharia. Sheikh Shams of Tabriz, he says, everybody knows this. That's not what I'm asking you. He says, everybody knows this. The reality of worship is that worship is a journey. It should take us to a destination. And then he recited to him a couplet in Farsi. And the translation, the meaning of the couplet is that the knowledge which does not take you away from yourself, you would rather be ignorant than have that knowledge. And so some have said that was the turning point in Mawlana Rum alayhi rahma's life. The third version is similar to the first one, but this time it is said that he was sitting by a pool. He was sitting by a pond, a pool, and he was deep in reading into his books, and Sheikh Shams of Tabriz appeared, and he said to him, "What is this?" And he said, "This is something you don't understand." And Sheikh Shams, he picked up the books and he threw them into the pond. And remember, these were handwritten manuscripts, so these were very valuable. So Mawlana Rum was very frustrated. He said, "What have you done? This is my life's work. These are irreplaceable books. You cannot put a value on these books. What have you done?" So Sheikh Shams, what he did, he put his hand into the pond and he took out the books and he showed them to him, and they were still dry. So he said, "What is this?" And he said, "This is what you don't understand." He said that you are somebody who is concerned with qal. Qal meaning reason, he said this, she said this, and this is what it meant. You're reasoning, you're being logical. This is what you're concerned with. We are concerned with hal. We are concerned with being in a state, being, in a particular place with regards to the Creator, the Lord of the universe. So you are dealing with qal and we're dealing with hal. So we have a different universe to yours. And after this, he left, and Mawlana Rum alayhi rahma, then he changed, he left everything, and he went in search of the spiritual path. There is one further narration which is recorded by Ibn Battuta. He's a famous traveller who travelled, and a historian. He captured lots of different things. He says that Mawlana Rum alayhi rahma, he was approached by a sweet seller, a halwa seller, on an occasion, and he purchased this piece of halwa and he ate it, and the moment he ate that, he changed. So who knows, perhaps it was a combination of all these different things. Perhaps these were all incidences that happened separately and different people witnessed them and recorded them separately. Whatever the case was, what we do know is that Sheikh Shams of Tabriz was that turning point in Mawlana's life. After he met him, then he wanted to go beyond the obstacles of reason and to understand the spiritual path. And that was the moment after which the Masnavi began to pour from the lips of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah. And those people who are learned, I'm not one of them, I'm telling you what they say. The people who are learned in the Masnavi, they will tell you that the Masnavi is really an interpretation, you could say, of the blessed Quran and the Sunnah. Everything that the Sharia seeks to teach, the Masnavi teaches in a different way. And it is a collection of stories and parables, wisdom, divine wisdom presented in a manner that we can understand. Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah himself, he says about his Masnavi, he says, all my couplets are a climate of wisdom and all these stories teach a lesson. And that's the amazing thing about the Masnavi. It seeks to teach you something. It seeks to guide you. Every story has a moral. Every story has a lesson. And if there is one lesson that we can take from the life of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, it is to learn to draw lessons from the things around us. So the Arabs, they have a saying that it means that if you take whatever makes you better and leave that which is filthy and which is dirty. And this is what Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah taught us, that in every situation, take the wisdom from it and leave everything else. Take the wisdom from every situation. And there are very many stories in the Masnavi. It contains of 6 books and 25,000 verses. So there's no way I can even begin to look into it. I'll just tell you one short story as an example of how Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah tried to impart his wisdom to the people. He says that Sayyiduna Musa alayhi salam was praying to Allah Almighty one day, and Allah Almighty said to Musa alayhi salam, Musa, I want you to make dua to me using a mouth that has never sinned. And Musa alayhi salam, he said, Ya Allah, how can I do that? Where can I find a mouth that has never sinned that it may supplicate to you? And he said, Oh Allah, I do not have such a mouth. So Allah Almighty commanded him, supplicate to me through the mouth of another, because that mouth has not committed the sins of yours. So therefore you can supplicate to me through a mouth that has not sinned. And Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam said, Ya Allah, how can I supplicate to you through the mouth of another? And Allah Almighty said, He said, make effort to do goodness. And do goodness to other people and gain their prayers. If you are good to people, they will automatically make dua for you. And the dua that somebody else makes for you is coming from a mouth that has not sinned, because it's not your own mouth. And so this is one of the stories that Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah records in his Masnavi. And then most of it actually is the lessons from the story. Then he discusses the lessons from all the different stories. And I'll finish off with 2 things very quickly. And I've got about 1 minute to do this, so inshallah. First of all, what have people said about Mawlana Rum and the Masnavi? I want to read to you a couple of quotes from Westerners regarding Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah. So, first of all, somebody by the name of E. Brown says, undoubtedly Rumi is the greatest of all Sufi poets, and his Masnavi deserves to be called the best poetry of all times. Joseph von Hammer, he says, the Masnavi is a pocket book for all Sufis from the river Ganges to the coasts of the Bosphorus. Reynold Nicholson, and these were the last words he uttered on his deathbed. He said, Rumi, now I understand you better, and he died. A.J. Arbery, he says, I will devote the rest of my life to studying Rumi's work. One can find there spiritual cures and consolations for the diseases of our age. And finally, a lady by the name of Irene Melikoff, she says, and this is very interesting, if the nations of the world were to translate Rumi's work into their own languages and read them, there would be no war, grudges, or hatred in the world. And this is the path of the Sufiya. Right? This is the path of the Sufiya. And perhaps it's for this reason that the United Nations committee, which is responsible for arts and culture, they adopted 2007 as the year of Rumi and celebrated his work. Finally, a verse, and then I'm going to do a brief dua. A verse from the Masnavi itself. And there's a great lesson in this for us. Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah, he says, Dil tura dar kuwe ahle dil kashad tan tura dar habse abo gil kashad. He says that your spirit, dil tura, your spirit, your heart, dar kuwe ahle dil kashad, it will drag you to the feet of those who have a sound heart. Tantura, your body, dar habse abo gil kashad, your body will take you to the prison of water and clay. That if you try to purify your heart and you follow your heart, it will take you to freedom. It will take you to the sittings, the gatherings of those people who are ahle dil, who are people of the heart, who are people of spirit. And if you are always concerned with your body, you're always trying to see how good you're looking, and you're concerned with things of the body, what you're going to eat, what's the next best thing to wear. If that's what you're always concerned with, then your body is going to drag you to a prison of clay and water. That's all it is. And that could be the body itself, or it could be the grave. That's where you're heading for. So this is the advice of Mawlana Rum alayhi rahmah. In the end, I'm going to recite to you a dua, and this is a type of tawbah and istighfar. On my part, if I have said anything wrong, then I pray to Allah Almighty for forgiveness. Anything good and right that I have said has come from Allah Almighty, and I am just a means to present that to you. May Allah Almighty accept what we have said. This is actually the work of another great Sufi poet, Sheikh Sa'di Shirazi alayhi rahmah, and it's a very famous Farsi book that the students of Dars Nizami, they learn in the first year, in the Farsi year. Karima bebakhshaye barhale ma ke hastam asire kamande hawa. O Lord of kindness, your mercy I do need, for I'm trapped inside the chains of my own greed. Nadarem gheraz to faryad rasi, tui aasiyan ra khata bakhsho bas. So who can I turn to show me the way? Besides you, no other can wipe my sins away. Nigahdar mara zirahe khata, khata dar guzaro sawabam numa. Protect me, O Allah, from the path of wrong. Overlook my misdeeds and help me stay strong. Karima bebakhshaye barhale ma, ke hastam asire kamande hawa. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.